Hello everyone. Today we're going to take a look at how we can design and outline presentations. And this will be working towards our week 3 learning objective, which is to design and record an annotated presentation with voiceover audio. Okay, so that's what we're working towards this week. And today specifically, we want to be able to create a storyboard following Gagne's 9 events of instruction. So we're going to learn about that today. Okay, now how do we get started when designing lessons, right? If we're using the ITLD model, we would get started in the analysis phase. It's the first one in our ITLD acronym. And the analysis phase is all about kind of looking at what's going into this and why we're creating that lesson and what we want to get out of the lesson and that sort of thing. So for our class, we're going to kind of do an abbreviated version of the ITLD process. We're going to look first at a needs assessment. And there's lots of things that go into a needs assessment, but essentially what I want you to figure out is why is our training or lesson needed? Okay, is this training coming about because we're not being safe in the workplace, right? Do we need a safety training? Do we want to improve in a metric? Do we want to get better at a specific task? Or is it more educational? Maybe there's a state standard that needs to be met and we just want to teach that standard. Right? But we have to figure out the why. Why are we teaching this lesson? Why is it needed? Why do our learners need this information? Right? That's what goes into the needs assessment. From there, we can set the goal of the course or the goal of the lesson, right? The generalized goal. We want to know, what is the purpose of this lesson? Okay, we're keeping it general here. We're not getting into specifics. We're not getting into specific skills. We're just talking about, generally speaking, what do we want to get out of this? What's the purpose of this lesson? What direction do we want to head in? And then we can iron out the specifics as we go. Now that we have a purpose of our lesson, it's good to next look at our learners, right? What types of learners do we have? Who's taking our course? That sort of thing. So when completing our learner analysis, there's kind of some key things I want you to pay attention to. 1, we want to know, who are the learners? 2, are there common characteristics? Are they all 10th graders? Are they all adult ed students? Are they truck drivers for a company, right? What commonalities do we have that we can have an idea of who these learners are and what their needs are? And also what their prerequisite knowledge is, right? Are they coming in with a vast knowledge base on this topic? Are they coming in as empty vessels that we have to teach the basics to, right? What is their level of that prerequisite knowledge? What is their developmental level, right? All of these things are important when considering how to design your lesson. If you're teaching kindergartners, right, you have probably a lot shorter of a window to teach your content than if you're teaching college students. So just kind of having that information, knowing who your learner is, knowing their characteristics, knowing the knowledge they have coming in, all of that is going to help you design your lesson better. All right, once we've considered our learners and we've considered our lesson goals, we can start to break that goal down into specific objectives. Okay, these are the learning targets we want to hit. These are things that we want to see learners be able to do when they leave our course. Okay, now, when writing learning objectives, there's a lot of information out there. An acronym that gets passed around a lot for objectives and business goals as well is SMART. Okay, there's a couple different, wordings. Sometimes these words are a little different, but here's the version that I like. Okay, so when writing objectives, keep it SMART, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. Okay, sometimes they use a different word for the A or the R in there, but this is the one I like. Okay, we want specific objectives. Anyone should be able to read your objective and understand what is going on, right? Anyone with the basic foundation of knowledge. If I were to give you an objective I have for a course, you as another teacher should then be able to take that objective and create an assessment for it, because it is so specific that you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's no generalities there to to confuse people, right? Good objectives are also measurable, right? The goal is that we can assess our objectives and see, is our student there or not, right? Did they meet this objective? Did they meet this criteria? So a good objective is also measurable, achievable. Okay, we don't want to set objectives that are so difficult that our students are going to fail. So we want to be reasonable there. We want to set achievable objectives. Relevant. Okay, we always want to be relevant to the course material at hand and making sure our objectives match our standards, making sure our objectives match our course purpose, right? We have to be relevant. And finally, timely. You only have so much time to give a training or to teach a course. In a class, oftentimes you have several different sections that we have to hit. So maybe you only get 1 month to teach all of Unit 1. So we have to make sure our objectives fit within our time allotment. So when talking about objectives, I'm going to give you guys some extra kind of resources at the end here that you can check out. But a good objective should have kind of all those aspects: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. When designing objectives, a lot of times people will suggest using an action verb based on the type of skill you want to learn. So some other kind of extend your learning opportunities we're going to have this week is on both Gagne and Bloom's taxonomies, right? And in these taxonomies, what they're doing is they're looking at the different types of skills students might be learning and the different layers to that and different levels. So both of these provide a great foundation for writing your objectives, right? If you want to teach an intellectual skill, Gagne suggests some different verbs that you can use in your objective to kind of classify exactly what skill you want them to learn. And a similar idea with Bloom's. So you can check those out when we're talking about specific skills and specific verbs. Both of those are great outlines on how to be specific when we're writing those objectives. All right, so now that we have our learning objectives figured out, the next step in our analysis process is the content analysis. And in the content analysis, essentially what you're doing is you're looking at your objectives, where we want students to be able to go. You're looking at how the content progresses, and you're kind of breaking it into pieces. Okay, so in the content analysis, we're looking to identify prerequisite knowledge needed to reach our learning objectives. Okay, so what skills do we need to get to our goal? Right, what scaffolding do we need? We're going to break that content into chunks, right? The goal is to build up to our learning objectives, so we want to break it into bite-sized chunks so that students can get there. And then that will help us create our lesson outline. Okay, so once we get to start creating that lesson outline, now we're starting to get into the design phase of our process. Now, as we start to finish our analysis phase, we're starting to have an idea of what we want in our course. We start to transition into the design phase, right? Where we're going to finalize our learning objectives. We're going to start building outlines and storyboards and that sort of thing to really have a good concrete plan moving into our development phase. Okay, so the design phase is all about taking what we learned in the analysis phase and creating a plan that we can act on. And there's lots of different options for figuring out how to make that plan and how to set that up, especially when we're talking presentations. One model that we're going to check out in this class is Gagne's Events of Instruction. And this is essentially a 9-part model that goes over the typical learning cycle. Okay, so Gagne, what he did is he looked at a lot of the best practices and suggestions of the day and age, right? And he broke it into 9 steps to encapsulate all of that. So let's take a look. Gagne's step 1. Okay, so when we're trying to teach something, step 1 is we want to gain the student's attention. Step 2, we should inform students of objectives. Okay, so we're going to get your attention. We're going to show you something interesting related to the topic. And then we're going to tell you, this is what we want to learn today. 3, we're going to stimulate recall of prior learning. So this is what we want to learn today, and it connects to last class and this follows up on last class because of, right, that idea. We're transitioning from previous knowledge to new knowledge. Okay, and what Gagne is doing here is he's having you remember your prior learning so that it's in your working memory, so that it's easier to build connections to the new content. Okay, so he's managing your germane cognitive load here. Now we're going to present the content. Okay, here's the teaching part, the new part. Here's what's new for today, students, right? You're teaching that new content. Then you're providing guidance. Okay, you're telling the students kind of how to work with that new content. Maybe you're walking them through an example problem. Maybe you're showing them how to use that note taker to answer various problems, that sort of thing. On 6, we elicit performance. Okay, so after you walk students through an example problem, you have them try it out, right? They try something on their own. They're trying that performance, the skill on their own to see how they do. Then we can provide those students feedback. Hey, here's how that problem was done. How did you do? Or maybe you're looking at their work directly and telling them, hey, pretty good here, but on this step, we went a little off, so let's fix that, right? So step 7, provide feedback. 8 is assess performance. So after you correct the student, at some point, you're going to want to actually test them and have that assessment. And then on 9, we want to enhance retention and transfer. So what does this mean? This means we want to tie this idea to the future, right? Here's how you might use this idea in the real world. Here's how we're going to build on this idea next class. Okay, so the idea of enhancing retention and transfer is you're kind of setting yourself up for future learning, right? Here is this concept that we've learned, and we're going to use it next class when we talk about this new idea, right? So you're really trying to build up there on number 9. Okay, so now that we have Gagne's kind of 9 events introduced, let's take a look at how we can use this to create a lesson outline. Okay, here's an example on photosynthesis. I'm not a biology teacher, so this probably is not great, but I like to pull from different disciplines instead of always giving math examples because not everyone's a math teacher. So, but let's take a look. Okay, number 1, we want to gain students' attentions. So maybe we start off that lesson with an essential question where we ask students, why do plants often face the sun or grow towards the sun or reach towards the sky, that sort of thing. Okay, so we open up with that discussion. We try to get them thinking about the real world. We try to gain their interest. We want to get them interested in the topic. We're not trying to scare them off yet. 2, when we're informing students of our objectives, we want to transition now from that essential question to the objective. Okay, so maybe this is part 2 in our lesson, where we want to take that essential question and now spin it into great point. Let's talk about our objective today. We're going to learn about photosynthesis, right? Next, to stimulate the recall of prior learning, maybe in this lesson, students have already seen carbon dioxide and oxygen in the class before, so we're just going to review what we learned last class quickly before we get into the new content. Step 4, present the content. Okay, we're going to introduce this new concept, and we're going to do it in chunks, right? Pretty simple there. To provide guidance, maybe we're going to walk students through how to use a photosynthesis graphic organizer, right? And we're showing them the picture and the labels and kind of how it all works. And then in step 6, we're going to tell students, use your organizer and try out this worksheet, right? We're going to elicit your performance. We're going to have you try out some classwork. And 7, to provide feedback. Maybe you're going over the worksheet answers on the board. Maybe you're walking up to each student and telling them what they did right and wrong, right? But we're going over that worksheet, going over those answers. And 8, maybe you give students a short quiz to assess their performance. And then finally, 9, to enhance that retention and transfer. And maybe at the end of class, you discuss how photosynthesis is going to lead into the next class, right? And how we're going to build off this idea in the future. Okay, so there is an example of our outline. Okay, it looks pretty busy. That's why I tried to introduce it piece by piece. But essentially, we're just breaking our 9 events down, and we're gaining an idea of what we're going to do kind of in each phase. And you can see how this creates a good little lesson from start to finish over a class period. All right, so now we have kind of a overall outline. If we want to start getting into the details, what we can do is use a technique called storyboarding, which you guys might have seen from film and video and that sort of thing. But storyboarding are an option for creating visual outlines scene by scene. Okay, so now we're going to start looking at, we have the big picture scope of our lesson. What is happening scene by scene, detail by detail, slide by slide, if we're talking a presentation. And these storyboards usually include a box that represents each scene in order, a visual to show the action of each scene, and then usually some text to describe key components of the scene. Okay, a lot of storyboards in the world of movies and film are done by hand with illustrations. Okay, we're not going to be quite as technical. I don't expect you guys to draw detailed pictures, but I do want to go over kind of the basics of storyboarding because I do think this is a really good organizational process, especially if you have multiple people working on a project, right? So just being able to keep track of everything with a visual outline really can help. So let's take a look at what this looks like. So here is kind of a generic loadout that I might use for PowerPoint to create that storyboard. You don't have to create it in PowerPoint or your presentation software specifically, right? You can create them in Word. You can create them by hand, just drawing little boxes. But this is what I like to do since we're going to be working in our presentation software. A lot of times I'll make kind of placeholder slides like this, and then I'll punch in a couple details, and then I'll use that on each slide to kind of figure out that storyboard, and then I'll start to build as I go. Okay, so we might have a general template like this, where we're going to have a spot for our title. We're going to either have a photo or a description of a photo we need to find, and then a description of the scene, right? What are we talking about on this slide? So here's an example of our photosynthesis lesson. Okay, part 1 is gaining that student attention. So that's what we want to do this slide. Okay, and we have in our description there, we have our essential question. Why do plants often face the sun? Right, that's kind of the purpose of this slide. That's what we want to talk about. And maybe I want to find a representational photo of plants in sunlight to kind of really illustrate this question for our students. Okay, so a lot of times I'll start with something like this, and I'll make that for several different slides in my PowerPoint before I actually build it out. So this is a really good way to kind of create that outline visually and to create that in the presenter software so that you can start building right from this. Okay, because something like this, I can very easily right-click my shape and paste a picture in place of that shape. Okay, so maybe I start with something like this, and then when I start building, okay, step 1, I replace the picture. Step 2, I probably tweak my text to make that question nice and big. And then I probably would eventually delete that title because we don't quite need that on this slide. Or I might put a more appropriate title for the students instead of one that, is more in-house. Like knowing that this is the gaining attention slide is great for us, but doesn't give the learner that much. So we'd probably tweak that. But that's the basic idea there. Okay, and then what's nice is once we build this out for each scene, you can go into your presenter's print options, and usually you can print multiple slides per page. So it's really easy to create that storyboard by just printing out your PowerPoint slides, and then we get this nice breakdown kind of what's happening each section, scene by scene, in our little box. Okay, so here's an example of what that would look like, and you would do this for each scene. Sometimes we'll have more than one box for a scene, right? Maybe you're presenting photosynthesis in 4 or 5 chunks, okay, where you're breaking them into little topics. So you might have 4 or 5 boxes just for presenting content, and that's okay. What's important is that we're creating an easy visual outline that we can start working from once we get to the next phase. Okay, so that's the new content for today. I want you guys to think about, right, the different steps of that analysis phase, how we can use Gagne's 9 events to kind of create an outline and eventually a storyboard. And that's kind of what we're going to walk through with our remaining tasks. Okay, so first things first, we do have a reading this week. And it's just a web article on how to write learning objectives. I'm not going to go into that in a ton of detail just because there's so much depth there. And I think for this course, I want to care more about the visual side and the technology side than the learning theory. So just read through that if you're not super comfortable writing objectives. Maybe skim through it if you find yourself, if you find that's an area that you're really comfortable in. Okay, so either read through or skim through that web article. There's a couple different other articles as well to extend your learning. If you want to know more about Gagne's taxonomy or Bloom's taxonomy, those are there. And there's also an article on Gagne's 9 events of instruction. There is a quiz, a little practice quiz, I think 4 questions. So if you want to kind of test your learning, test your understanding of this PowerPoint, try that out. And our assignment for the day is going to be, we're going to start on that Project 2 storyboard. That should say part 1 there. Okay, we're going to do it in 3 parts just like last week. But we're going to start working on that storyboard. Oh, yes, Project 2 is going to be our annotated presentation. And then today we're working on the storyboard. So part 1 is the storyboard. So you're going to try that out today. Why don't we pop over to Web Canvas and we'll take a look at what that looks like. Okay, so here we can see Project 2 is going to be our annotated presentation that we're building out this week. And part 1 that we're working on today is the storyboard for that presentation. Now, I will say this is a practice run. Okay, this doesn't have to be a long, in-depth presentation. Okay, so when you're looking to start storyboarding and creating this lesson, I'm going to let you choose the course, the topic, the learner group, but pick something short. Okay, don't pick something that's going to take 30, 40 slides to cover. Pick something that you can talk about in maybe 10 or so slides. Okay, pick a shorter topic. That way we're not just spending so much time on content and really we're focusing more on the process. Okay, so going in, that's my advice, is pick something lighter on the content. This week, we're going to be presenting a lesson, right? So like I just said, you get to choose the course, the topic, and the learner group. Okay, it's okay if this is related to your real world job, or everything can be hypothetical. That's fine as well. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to a course you've taught or students you're familiar with. All right, but we're going to be answering the following questions. Then we're going to create an outline and storyboard for our lesson. And then, of course, we're going to save everything in a Word document so that we can turn it in down the line. Okay. So, remember, keep it brief. Pick a topic with smaller content, but we're going to walk through the process together in this. So, you're going to start with a needs assessment, right? I want to know, why is that training session or lesson needed? Okay, so we're going to start with the why. So why are we offering this? What's the goal? Okay, and then that transitions very well into our next point. What is the goal, right? What's the purpose of our lesson? Okay, then I want to know about the learner analysis. Who are the learners, right? What do we know about them? Okay, and this will vary depending on who you pick, but just try to give me some background knowledge here, some context to the people you're preparing this lesson for. Okay, you're going to write some learning objectives, right? We want to know what the learner should be able to do after completing our lesson. Then we're going to analyze the content, think about what chunks of information do we have to break our content into so that we can teach it to these learners, right? What scaffolding do we need so that we can hit our objectives? And then we're going to take that idea and we're going to break it down using Gagne's 9 phases. Okay, that'll help us create an outline. And then that outline, we want to turn into a storyboard. Okay, so we're going to finish with our storyboard. And you can create this by hand is fine. If you want to draw the boxes and sketch illustrations, that's fine. Just scan it in for me. Or if you want to use a computer program, if you want to use PowerPoint, if you want to use a Word document, if you want to use a Google alternative, Canva, doesn't matter to me. But I want you to create that storyboard, and we want to outline all the 9 events. Okay, and we might have multiple scenes for some of those events, like we said earlier. That's okay. So you'll probably have more than 9 little boxes, but we want to kind of break down the lesson using that storyboarding technique and getting that practice in. So that's our goal for today, right? And then next class, we're going to start to develop our materials. We're going to start to create our presentation based on this idea. And then Thursday, we'll learn how to record video and audio on our computer so that you can annotate that presentation. So yeah, that's what we're working on today. Once again, reach out, email, web canvas if you have any questions. Looks like everyone got their portfolios turned in, so great job there. The ones I've glanced at so far all look like you guys did a pretty good job. So keep up the good work, and yeah, let me know if you guys need anything, and have a great day.